Lunchtime yesterday, I heard there were going to be 39 major protests around the country, all of which could lead potentially to violence and riots. Crikey, I thought. That's a very big number. By the time I left here last night at 8 o'clock, we were told there could be up to 100 of these major protests, with up to 30 planned counter-protests going to take place across the country. And Britain was literally battening down the hatches. There were market towns in England where GP appointments had been cancelled all afternoon. Hospitals had been reducing their services. Retailers were closing shops, spending money on wood and boarding up their premises. And then what happened? Well, not really very much at all. And it kind of turns out that there was a post on a Telegram group saying, you know, it's time to mask up and go out there and do your stuff. It turned out that organisations that call themselves anti-fascist groups were very mobilised and organised with their printed banners, and they turned up in big numbers in Walthamstow and I think in Brighton and many other parts of the country too. And kind of, you know, think about it, really, one of the biggest policing operations we've ever seen. Goodness knows what the cost of this whole thing was. Was it some gigantic, enormous, expensive hoax? Love to get your thoughts, Farage at gbnews.com. But, you know, it's funny, if you looked at the media today, especially the BBC, etc., you would have thought, well, it's absolutely marvellous, isn't it, that all these wonderful people have come out onto the streets to stop this beastly behaviour that we've seen over the last week. And I have no doubt the vast majority of those that did turn out on these so-called counter-protests genuinely wanted to see peace, law and order and decency returned on our streets. But what I've learned, very much to my cost over the years, is those people, the Be Kind Brigade, aren't always quite as kind as you may think. This was a speech given in Walthamstow last night. Jones, Labour councillor, I'm pleased to say he has now been removed as a Labour councillor and subsequently arrested. But interesting, isn't it? You know, despite what he said, horrible things that he said, big applause from the crowd, and free Palestine. What the hell has free Palestine got to do with the events of this week? Lloyd, you were in Brighton last night. I think there were about sort of 4 protesters and a couple of thousand counter-protesters. Well, I mean, how well organised was the so-called counter-protest? Clearly quite big.
Well, I think, first of all, I don't think it was not a hoax that people were putting out that they were going to turn up. Some people did turn up. It wasn't a hoax that these places had been identified. But clearly, the idea that the far-right rioters and people who've been terrorising the streets are organised is not true. What it is that there are a band of people who are running around causing mayhem, inspired by a lot of people on social media. I'm afraid some of your comments that have been spun out, and you've had
in the most disgusting way.
You've had those discussions. I think that probably you should have moderated some of those comments, and you have noticed, and you have quite rightly said that you got waylaid by certain bits of information.
No, Lloyd. All I asked for was I wanted to know the identity of the man that had murdered those children.
And as you know, there are many reasons why the police can't do that, including when someone's under 18.
And had they? But in the end they did.
And in the end they did. Because they went to the court, and the court allowed the person's name to be released. But you were asking the police to break the law because they would have had to release it before they went to court to release a minor's name.
I didn't.
And
I didn't know he was 17.
No,
I didn't know anything.
You know that there are laws that mean that police can't release names immediately for many different reasons.
Well,
You're a clever enough man to know that.
Do you know
Nigel.
what?
And the fact that you then doubled down on it, rather than saying, hands up, actually, I was wrong there, I was wrong about that, and actually what I should have done is told people, take a breather, we'll find this in good time, and actually what's important is you don't suddenly conflate. The
world has changed. To take a breather actually was a disaster. And the reason is, out there were all sorts of theories speculating. Exactly right. The Southport riots happened on the scale they happened because of the lack of information. And I think the police, I think ministers, given we're in a social media age, need to rethink how we put information out.
That is a fair point. That is a very fair point.
Yeah.
But
the game has
that's the
changed.
point that you should have expressed, not police tell us, knowing that the police can't currently tell you. If you'd gone out in Parliament and said, actually, I think that this has been exaggerated because we couldn't tell, we need to review the rules and laws which don't allow us to do this immediately. I think that would have been a very fair point.
You know, when the London Bridge attack happened, within an hour we knew the person had been on.
Yes, because they weren't under 18. But I think what we've seen this weekend, or this last day, is clearly it's not organised, but these were real targets that were being circulated online.
Sure.
But there were far too many, and there aren't that many fascists and far right in this country to ever cover the hundreds.
I think that's the real point.
And then I think on the other side of the argument, what is clear is the country, broadly, ordinary people in this country, are a bit fed up with their shops being smashed up and people running amok in their country. And so what they've done is come out in large numbers, and organisations like Hope Not Hate, of course, let me just finish, because your accusation is that they've printed these...
Hope Not Hate. Hope Not Hate are an anti-fascist organisation who target conservatives and reform.
But these organisations have banners around stopping racism that are in warehouses because they do anti-racism marches and demonstrations very regularly. The idea that they had kind of planned it for this day, I think is totally wrong.
Were well organised. They were well organised. Kwasi, the truth is, yes, we do have, you can call it the football hooligan wing or whatever you want, and that exists, but it is actually very small.
I agree. I think it's exaggerated to make a political point. And I also feel that the underlying causes of the riots, and this is a point you've made, I've made, and other people have made, people aren't looking at that.
No.
So it's all been about, essentially, the far right and thugs. And there's also an element of criminality. There are people who are not remotely political.
And looting going on.
All of that. And then we've got to actually consider, it was crude, some of it was violent, but there's genuine concerns, and you'll know this as an MP, I certainly knew it representing my seat, about the levels of immigration, and that's an important part of